Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. If you're tuning in today, there's a good chance you know the absolute grind of retail. You're the frontline managers, the supervisors, the team leads, sweating it out on the floor every single day. You're the ones unlocking those doors at dawn, wrestling with the truck deliveries, and keeping the daily chaos somewhat organized. Today, we're diving into a really crucial lesson from Chris Albury's Built from the Aisles Up, a retail leadership survival guide. We're zooming in on Chapter 8, and honestly, it hits pretty hard. We're talking about the emotional maturity it actually takes to survive on the sales floor. Let's get right into it.
Let's kick things off with a scenario we literally all know too well. Why does a rejected idea hurt so much? You know the exact feeling. You pour real, genuine thought into a merchandising layout. You sketch it out, you walk the floor plan, you drag the product out, you present it beautifully to your district manager, and you get a flat, totally unceremonious, "No, do it this way instead." It stings, right? It feels incredibly personal because you put your blood, sweat, and tears into that display, and it just got shot down in 3 seconds flat.
And that brings us to the core truth we're unpacking today. Listen to this quote straight from the source. Merchandising is just an opinion, and sometimes your opinion doesn't matter. Boom. I want to deliver that to you right now like a trusted mentor sitting across from you in the break room. It's a harsh reality check, for sure, but it's a necessary one. We so often treat our layouts like they're undeniable mathematical equations, but the truth of the retail business is just way more subjective than that.
So let's talk about what happens when your opinion fails.
Let's really unpack the friction and frustration that bubbles up right there in the aisle when your brilliant idea gets shut down. Look, retail is exhausting. You've got the physical fatigue from walking miles on concrete and the mental fatigue from putting out fires all shift long. When you're the one actually opening the store, building the physical displays, and sweating through the execution, a flat no feels like a direct attack on your competence. It's so easy to think, hey, they aren't the ones in the trenches, why aren't they listening to me? That sting is completely valid. But how we handle that sting, that's what separates a rookie from a true leader.
Notice how this definition really grounds us back in reality. Merchandising, no matter how brilliant or flawless a plan seems to your eye, is ultimately subjective. It's just an opinion. And in a corporate hierarchy, your opinion is always going to be subject to upper management's discretion. They might have sales data you don't have, they might have a brand directive you haven't even seen yet, or frankly, they might just prefer the blue boxes next to the red ones. And you know what? That is absolutely their call to make.
Which brings us to the real battle here: ego versus execution.
This is a major crossroads for any frontline leader. We really need to look at the psychological tension happening inside your head. Why do we tie our personal self-worth to an end cap display or a seasonal floor layout? Seriously, ask yourself, when does that attachment start working against you? Think back to a time when you let a rejected layout ruin your entire shift. You sulked, your team totally felt the tension, and the whole vibe in the store just tanked. We've all been there. But let's be totally honest with each other right now. That is emotional immaturity. When you let a no break your spirit, you're letting your ego get in the way of your actual job. Pouting on the sales floor literally helps no one. So the absolutely crucial point is understanding the difference here. Look at the contrast between sharing your take versus getting emotional. Advocating for your idea and bringing the why to your leadership, that's healthy, it's mature. It shows you actually care about the store. But the toxic flip side of that is desperately needing to win the argument and tying your whole identity to the outcome. Remember, you are not your end cap.
I really want you to let that sink in. You don't need to win. So what does it actually look like to confidently share a strong opinion with management without desperately needing that opinion to be the final decision? Well, it looks like quiet confidence. It looks like pitching your layout, giving 3 solid data-backed reasons why it drives sales, and then taking a breath and waiting for the verdict. If it's no, you just nod and say, "Understood, let's make your plan happen."
Let's take a look at how this plays out during a real store reset.
I don't want to just give you a bunch of theory. Let's see what this looks like in the trenches, with a real-world story from Chapter 8. Here's an exact excerpt from the author Chris Albury. He writes, "I walked into a reset with a clear vision of how I thought the layout should go. Right there, off the bat, we have a leader who was prepared and engaged. He wasn't just sleepwalking through his shift. He had a vision. He did the work."
Let's break down the exact sequence of events from his story. Step 1, he walked in with a vision. Step 2, he explained it to the team and backed it up with solid reasoning. He did exactly what a good, proactive manager should do. But then, step 3, leadership went in another direction entirely.
They literally said no. So what did he do? Step 4, he accepted the pivot and led with energy. He didn't let the sting of rejection derail the entire night's work.
And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute heart of the chapter. I didn't pout. Just 3 simple words, but man, they carry so much weight. Refusing to complain, refusing to drag your feet when you don't get your way, that is the ultimate hallmark of professional execution. That is what true emotional maturity looks like. It's taking your ego out of the equation entirely so the team can succeed. Because at the end of the day, the job is execution.
And that leads us perfectly into redefining what your actual job description is. Now, this can be a really tough pill to swallow, especially for high achievers, but here it is. You are there to execute, not to reinvent the wheel. Your primary duty as a frontline retail leader is making the final plan happen. You're the engine making the store run. You aren't always necessarily meant to be the architect of the master plan, and honestly, accepting that reality is incredibly freeing once you get the hang of it.
But hold on a second. Executing doesn't mean you're just some mindless robot stacking boxes. The source material is super clear on this. Share your take and bring the why. Advocating for your idea and explaining your reasoning is absolutely part of the job. Management wants leaders who think critically. They desperately want your input. You just have to learn how to divorce your input from your ego.
Because at the end of the day, as the text says, your idea might not be used, and that's okay. I want you to start viewing letting a rejected idea go as an empowering act of professional maturity. It is not an act of defeat. It's definitely not submission. It's simply saying, hey, I gave you my absolute best counsel, you made the call, and now you're going to watch just how well I can execute your vision.
So how do we navigate leading an unchosen change?
How do we actually put this into practice? Let's coach you on how to apply this on your very next shift when you're forced to lead a change you didn't choose. Here's a quick, actionable checklist inspired right from the source material. Next time you pitch an idea, state your clear vision. Explain the reasoning behind it. Bring that why. Then actively listen to the final call from leadership. If it's a no, mentally detach your ego in that exact moment. Just take a breath. And finally, execute the pivot flawlessly. You advocate hard, but you do it without clinging defensively to the outcome.
And here's the kicker. You have to do it with full energy, because that's the job. As the story from the text showed us, sometimes you really do have to fake it until you make it. Your team is watching your every move. If you drag your feet and complain, I promise you they will drag theirs. You have to bring the exact same infectious, driving energy to a merchandising plan you didn't choose as you would to a plan you built yourself from scratch.
All right, let's wrap this up with the ultimate survival tip.
We're nearing the end of our explainer today, and I want to leave you with the definitive takeaway that ties this whole concept together. Here it is. Don't tie your identity to your ideas. Respect the decision, pivot, and move forward like it was your brilliant plan all along. This is exactly how you survive and thrive in retail leadership without burning out. It takes immense emotional maturity to separate your self-worth from a daily task. Look, if management shoots down your layout, they are rejecting the layout, not you. They aren't rejecting your value as a leader. So the next time you hear a no on the sales floor, I want you to ask yourself a very serious question. Are you going to pout, or are you going to pivot and lead? Think about it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.